The odds of Ohio State losing to Indiana this weekend aren't super high, but it's still a possibility. Like the kid from Angels in the Outfield said, it could happen. So what would have to happen for Ryan Day to stay in the good graces of Buckeye Nation if they do lose this Saturday after basically using the GDP of an undeveloped country to construct this roster? Well, to me, you obviously have to beat Michigan, and then a 10-2 Ohio State will make the playoff. They could possibly host, but I don't think that's going to be good enough. In my opinion, you have to at least make the national title game if you lose to Indiana. Anything short of that could wind up with him moving on to another destination, whether it be in college, as a head coach, or an OC in the NFL. You see, Ohio State is one of the golden egg locations in college football. And after suffering a lack of championships and losing to Harbaugh and Michigan so many times here recently, tensions do seem to be super high around Ryan Day. And they should be. Because anything less than excellence is failure in Columbus. And when you operate a machine like Ohio State, you better get big results pretty consistently, and that has been lacking, even with all the advantages that are built in. But I want to know in the comments if you agree with what Day has to do if they lose to Curt Cignetti in Indiana this weekend, because it's a tall task regardless. David Cohn, former Michigan quarterback, knows a little bit about the Big Ten, and deep down, I don't think he'd hate to see Ohio State lose this weekend. My brother, former Western State Colorado wide receiver Blaine Crain. Coney, we were looking at the contract, but before we get into kind of what you think, and I'm pretty sure me and you are aligned in this, I think Blaine is too, and what he would have to do if they lose this game. Can you kind of give us the details quickly of Ryan Day's contract with Ohio State and what the buyout would be?
Yeah, so he signed a 7-year deal that's good through 2028, and the buyout would be $37 million. Ooh. So I have a hard time believing that the Buckeyes are going to pay a $37 million buyout for a coach who would still, in this scenario, have won 10 games and possibly make the college football playoff. The interesting thing is you have Indiana and Michigan back-to-back, and the top 5 matchup for the first time in a couple years is not Michigan, it's Indiana. So look, let's see how they perform this weekend. Buckeyes are a really tough team to beat in the horseshoe. And then more importantly, let's see what happens next week. Is there a possible slip-up against your arch rival? And I think that's another thing for Buckeye fans. It's not just the lack of national championships that Ryan Day's been able to win, but you haven't been beating your arch rival, and you've had really, really, really good players. Top 10 picks every single season, and Michigan, your rival, has out-physicaled you. How does that change now that Jim Harbaugh has departed for the NFL? So I think that's what a lot of Buckeyes are really anticipating, really looking forward to seeing. I just have a hard time believing they're going to pay a $37 million buyout for a coach who still wins double-digit games and is top 5 in win percentage.
Yeah, and I think, and this is an obvious statement, but if you beat Indiana, it would be more devastating if you lost to Michigan than if you lost to Indiana and then beat Indiana and then lost to Michigan, as opposed to losing to Indiana and beating Michigan. I mean, I know what Ohio State fans want. I wonder, though.
Well, that would still keep you in the Big Ten championship.
It would still.
That would still give you, what happens if they beat Indiana, have the head-to-head tiebreaker, go lose to Michigan, they're 10-2, go to the Big Ten championship game with a rematch against Oregon, beat them in a rematch. They're the 2 overall seed in the college football playoff. Make a run there and win, or possibly lose a national championship.
Yeah, it's just, I wonder how that would, work out, obviously, with Michigan not being in the mix. I mean, if Ohio State loses this game to Indiana, that gives you 2 conference losses. Indiana, even though they lost to Ohio State, if they win their last game, they would end up higher in the pecking order, and then you have Penn State there as well.
In that scenario, you'd need help from Penn State because your tiebreaker wouldn't kick in. But, hey, they go on the road and play Minnesota.
That is true. I think they're 11-point favorites. But, Blaine, do you see Ohio State, if they were to lose to Indiana or Michigan, going the route of their rival and what Michigan did to Jim Harbaugh, where you walk in and say, hey, listen, we need to talk about this contract, maybe get some money back, maybe reduce the buyout, and then you're really on the hot seat for that next year, even though you'll be able to probably construct a really good roster.
How much money do they pay for this roster?
Like $20 million?
$20 million? And I heard it's maybe even north of that. Look, I could go coach Ohio State right now and win 10 games. With the athletes they have running around the field, I don't even think they need a football coach. Sooner or later, Ryan Day is going to have to win something important, because those Ohio State fans are not going to sit around and wait for it to happen. With the athletes that you have walking around that football field, and the fact that you haven't won a natty, to me, is almost questionable in the decision. You're lucky Harbaugh is in the NFL because he was mopping you with less talent. So at some point, you paid all this money, and if you lose to Indiana this weekend, Curt Cignetti and Mom Spaghetti come up there with a bunch of I wouldn't say nobodies, but guys who aren't making a lot of money to beat that roster, those Ohio State fans are going to let loose. And look, if you can pay $20 million for a roster, that $37 million buyout might not hurt as bad.
Well, and also, let's add context to this. Michigan is coming off an undefeated season where they won the national championship. I mean, you go back, and the way I think about it is, I'll give you a great example. In basketball, Auburn basketball makes the Final Four, then all of a sudden Alabama starts taking basketball super seriously. There's something in the realm of that rivalry where when the other team does something really good, it does nothing but amplify the need for you to go in and make a big splash. I think it's not that Ohio State wouldn't have paid money to get this great roster, but I think some of what went to building this roster and that money was, hey, Michigan just went undefeated and won a national championship. We need to figure this out, even if we got to just buy the best talent.
Without a doubt. And Blaine, you made a couple great points. One, you spent $20 million at least, right, on your roster, and the expectations aren't going to change in Columbus. The expectations are national championships. The two guys before you did that, Urban Meyer won one, Jim Tressel won a national championship, so that's not going to change. It's just in a year that the landscape is a bit different now with the 12-team playoff. So yeah, they could lose to Indiana, and that's a bad look traditionally. But you could still make the college football playoff and possibly win the national championship.
What's acceptable if you're an Ohio State fan?
That's my question.
And how? Say you don't win the Big Ten, okay, but you still make the playoffs. How far can you go to where Ohio State fans would be like, you know what? We had a damn good year.
I think it's a national championship.
I
think they'd still be pissed.
Is it the semis?
You got to win that, and there's some Buckeyes fans who that's still not good enough because you didn't win your league, which is what we were talking about with conference championship games this year. But you win the national championship,
it's all cured.
Everyone in Columbus is going to be excited, especially if you do it on the heels of Michigan winning one. But yeah, I think that you make a couple good points there with the expectations for the fans. They're not going to change. And if you don't win the national championship in a year when you spent $20 million, yes, the Buckeyes fans are not going to be happy. I just want everyone to keep in mind the fans don't make the decision on whether or not Ryan Day keeps his job.
Who has more patience?
So it's the administration
as a fan base, Ohio State or Penn State?
Oh,
Penn State.
Got to be Penn State, right?
I mean, they're both super high, but if we're going to split hairs, it's going to be Penn State.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
sooner or later, James Franklin's going to win something important too, right?
Yeah, we'll see. I think he's going to get a shot with the way this works out. Hey, appreciate you guys checking us out. If you don't mind, hit that subscribe button, turn that notification bell on because it's getting thick really quick, and we want you to be along for the ride.